Okay, welcome everyone to TAM Lab number 62. Today we're excited to have Dale McKay joining us, and he's going to be going through a overview and install of Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, or TKG, in his home lab. So I'm going to stop my sharing, and Dale, if you're out there, I'll hand it over to you.
Cool. Thank you, Steve. Hey, everybody. How we doing today?
Doing good.
Good, cool. Everybody see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
All right. So let's start off, and I'll tell you that I am not a Kubernetes guru. Hopefully, when I get done showing you how to install this in your home lab, the real Kubernetes rock stars, of which we have one, Scotty Ray, is on the call, can kind of step in and give you some direction of how you might move forward from this point. So, and the reason I'm making this distinction is the first part of this session is going to be, how do I install this in my home lab? You're going to have the benefit of watching me do this live. Yes, I said live, not a taped, not an edited MP4. So if you hear a little quavering in my voice, it's because I've been through this several times, feel pretty comfortable in it, but there's a couple of gotchas that I want to make sure that I highlight to you guys. So the whole idea is to get TKG up and running in your home lab, and I said that we can show you how to do it in 30 minutes or less. So that means at this point, by 12:40, I've got to be done. The first place that you want to go is you want to go read what William Lamb wrote about the demo appliance, and that demo appliance you can find right here. It's a Fling now. The thought for doing this session actually came out of a session that William did, I don't know, maybe a month or 6 weeks ago, where he distributed some OVAs and wasn't quite as polished as what you get when you use the demo appliance that is now the Fling. So you can go to this Fling. You notice that it supports vSphere 6.7 Update 3 as an on-premise platform, and it also supports VMC on AWS if you're one of those lucky individuals that has unlimited funding for your VMC on AWS environment. It's if we look at the instructions, there's a couple of guides that you're going to want to download along with everything else. In those guides, let me just pull those up for you real quick. And I have the links to those right here, but in those guides is where you will find everything that you need to know about what we're going to do today. This is the prereq guide, and the first part of this is for VMC on AWS environment, which we're not going to do. So we'll skip down to what we are going to do.
Can I ask a question real fast?
Sure, absolutely.
Can you confirm this is not going to be a demonstration of vSphere native pods, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we said that up front. My guess is there might be some folks who think that native pods and TKG are part of the same thing, and they're not.
They're not. This is for running, as I read a couple of places, this is for running TKG on vSphere, not in vSphere.
Correct.
So I'm actually really glad you said that, so we could make that distinction, that what I'm going to show you today is running on vSphere, not in vSphere. Cool?
Yes, and just for, I'm going to say this out loud, you correct me if my understanding is incorrect. The difference is the worker nodes will be virtual machines hosted inside of vSphere, but could just as easily be virtual machines hosted on top of KVM or Hyper-V, or could be bare metal. That's what we're looking at today, whereas native pods would be the ESXi nodes themselves are the worker nodes.
as I understand it, that's correct.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so one of the first things that this document, and let me get that out of the way, one of the first things that this document's going to have you do is it's going to have you go and configure the network, and then we're going to configure a resource pool, we're going to configure a folder and some templates, we're going to configure a content library. I'm going to show you an extra little trick there. Then we're going to deploy the demo appliance that came from the Fling. We're going to create a management cluster, and last, we'll create a workload cluster. So let me go show you a couple more things at a high level. Here's the physical platform we're working on today. Just wanted you to see what its capabilities are, because I always get asked about, you know, how much memory, what CPUs, whatever. All of that's right here. You can see this is a 256 meg physical box. We're going to be running it on a nested cluster that's on top of that physical box. Each one of those nested hosts has 32 gig and 2 CPUs. So nothing too crazy there. This is kind of a high level what my lab looks like. We don't need to spend a lot of time there. You get the idea. We're doing this in a nested environment. And then lastly, there's some useful commands that I just wanted to get into the presentation and also into the slides that hopefully we can get to circulate. This link down here will take you to documentation on TKG also. So I think at this point we can kind of dispense with the slides and let's just jump into it. All right, I took a couple of liberties. And what I mean by a couple of liberties is you will see that I have already gone in and created a resource pool. You can see, let me just show you what it looks like. Nothing, no reservations, no limits. It's just a resource pool. I've also gone in and created the templates folder and created templates out of 2 of the downloads that you're going to do. One of them obviously is for Cube and the other is for the load balancer or the HA proxy. The documentation walks you through how to create the template if you're not up to speed on how to do that. And then we'll also create a TKG folder. One of the, if I'm following that step-by-step list, the network in my home lab, I've just put it on my distributed switch VM network. I try not to get too fancy with the networking because my lab changes quite a bit. And sometimes I find it easier just to keep everything on one flat network. Obviously, your mileage may vary. You set your lab up as you see fit. There's nothing that's really outstanding about the particular network setup other than the fact that it does need DHCP. Hang on, I see a question. Yeah, I created the resource pool by hand. Does the demo location provide power CLI? No. Son, no. I don't remember there being a lot of power CLI in the documentation. So we've created a network, we created a resource pool, we've created the folder, we've created the templates. Let me go show you something about the content library. So the TKG demo content library is the one that we're concerned about. There will be 3 templates in here. Here's our demo appliance. Here's the Photon OS that has Kubernetes on it, and then here's our HA proxy. William also has another content library that you guys might want to think about subscribing to, and this is certainly doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. This is just a little bit of extra goodness thrown in, and that is you can subscribe to his nested content, what I call nested content library, and get all of his nested content OVAs. And obviously you can stay in sync with him. He's even got the one for ESX7 up. All right, so we're doing pretty good on time. I'm actually kind of eating into my own 30 minutes. I've kind of covered all the basic setup. So let's go and begin our journey to deploy the demo appliance. And we're going to use that guy right there. Now, I'm going to ask you guys to try and make our waiting time as entertaining as possible. I don't have the latest and greatest hardware, so there will be some pausing that's going to go on, not from me talking, but pausing in the sense that some of my creations aren't quite as fast as other people's environments. So any questions up to this point? Really?
I'll ask a question.
Good.
The demo appliance, what does that give you? Is that the piece that will replace having to install TKG and kind and all that stuff on the Mac OS or Linux VM?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
In fact, you're going to do all of your work really from the demo appliance, and you're going to see that in just a minute when we get it up and running. I'm going to show you. And you can see here I'm selecting my VM network, my distributed switch VM network. Let me just put in a couple of values here for you guys.
Yeah, and Dale, while you're filling that out, I was just looking at the Fling site, and it shows what's included in the download, right? So there's the TKG CLI, Harbor, TMC or Tanzu Mission Control CLI, Octant, the kubectl CLI, and then Docker Compose.
Yep. I mean, it's when we get this up and running, I'm going to be able to demonstrate a demo app that is rolled into it. And you'll see that it's pretty much full-fledged Kubernetes. I mean, you will see what container is actually serving up the web front end for the application. Obviously, I'm terrible at multitasking. I find it, a little difficult to kind of talk and. So we're going to let this guy deploy. It'll take us a couple of minutes. One of the things that you're going to see me do here in just a minute is you have to create an SSH tunnel using PuTTY. And for me, that was like the first time I'd ever done that. In fact, when I ran through the original release of this, I actually got to the point where it didn't give me a prompt back, and I emailed William. I said, yeah, mine's hung. And he said, no, that's the way it works. So at the risk of, let me just show you what that means to you in terms of how you're going about configuring this. So here's my PuTTY client, and what you want to do is over here under SSH tunnels, you want to go and create a tunnel, an SSH tunnel to port 8080 on your local host. The way you do that is just type 8080 in here, add, and then give it the IP of your local host, and you'll see what we're going to use this for in just a minute. So it looks like, is this guy deployed? Looks like this guy's deployed. Let's go ahead and power him on. And we can watch him boot up. When he gets boot up, then we're going to PuTTY into him and begin the next step, which is going to be to create the TKG management cluster. Doesn't take too long for this guy to boot up. Any more questions? Anybody?
Yeah, I got more of a comment, I guess, but
Yeah.
just from like a prerequisites perspective, right? You don't have NSXT here, right? That's
I
not
do
a
not.
requirement for TKG. That's a requirement for native Kubernetes within vSphere 7.
Yep.
Or project specific, right? So
and I'll
maybe
let the real Kubernetes guys talk a little bit more about this. But one thing that you will see when we build this is that we build Calico containers. So I'm assuming that Calico is the networking portion of what it is that we're doing. Again, this is TKG on vSphere, not TKG in vSphere. Go ahead, Scotty. I saw you wanted to say something.
Yeah, so just to be clear, right? So the VMs that get deployed that make up the control nodes and the worker nodes for the TKG Kubernetes cluster, those VMs can be deployed on top of any vSphere networking. So it can be a regular VDS port group, it can be a NSXT logical switch, etc. The container networking interface for the Kubernetes pod networking that's inside TKG today, that CNI, Calico is the only supported CNI. Project Antria, which is the open source NSX project that's going, that'll be supported soon. You can actually deploy Antria inside, but from a supported configuration from the product today, Calico is what's supported out of the box. Antria will be coming soon. So NSXT is actually not supported as the CNI for TKG today for the Kubernetes.
Cool.
Which makes sense because we're trying to support vanilla Kubernetes, right? Even people who aren't running VM or anything.
All right, so I'm going to enter a command. Everybody should be able to see my screen right now. And this is the one that actually tripped me up the first couple of times I went through, not when we're using the Fling, but the first time through the whole process. And you'll see that now it looks like indeed my screen is hung. It's not hung. This is where you have to go and open up yet a second SSH. This is the one with the tunnels right here. Sorry that you guys can't see that open up. And now what I do is I go to my browser. Oops, sorry guys. I did one thing wrong here.
One thing maybe while Dale is getting this going, I think this is a requirement for Appliance way of doing it. Because if you do it on your Mac, for example, you do not need to open the second tunnel. It just automatically, after that command that Dale typed in, it will launch your browser and get you to the page.
Yep. There's probably a pretty good chance that what I'm doing is all Windows related. Let me just close that out. And we're going to do this over here.
Oh, you spilled in it, Ron.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm always here to point out your spelling mistakes.
I appreciate it. I really do.
You're welcome.
And in theory, nothing would stop you when you establish your initial SSH connection from just doing all the port forwards at the same time, even if the ports aren't even open yet.
Yep. Say, actually, ask me that again, Zach.
So whenever you establish your initial SSH connection, I'm assuming you didn't, I wasn't paying super close attention, but I'm assuming you didn't actually forward any ports for that first SSH session. Is that right?
No, that's correct.
Yeah, and so what I'm saying is when you initiated that first SSH session, you actually could have just done all of your port forwarding at that time. Even though the ports may not have been open yet, you could have gone ahead and done whatever remaining work, opened up the ports. Those port forwarding rules would still work.
Actually, I haven't tried that. I can only assume that it would work.
Yeah, it
No?
should. I haven't tried it myself, but I can't think of any reason why it wouldn't work, and it would save you from the trouble of opening up multiple SSH connections. And no doubt we could probably give some feedback to William Lamb to remove one of the extra steps in the instructions.
The fling goes a long ways towards making things a lot easier.
Oh, I'm sure.
The previous iteration of this was, a little tedious to get set up. The good thing about the whole setup is once you get it up and running, and we're going to get there today. Once you get it up and running, it's actually very stable and it's not very resource intensive. You'll see I'll have it running alongside other things that will be using some of the CPU, and it's still going to be quite responsive, given where we're at. All right. So I finally got on the right device, and you can see that when I did TKG init and started the UI, you can see that it looks like I hung. Then I opened up my tunnel. Now when I go here, what I get is a user interface for creating that management interface.
So Dale, while you're filling all this out, I got a question, I guess more for Scotty, but right, this is a fling and it's called the demo TKG appliance, right? So I'm thinking like this is a lab, this is a demo. What would it be, how would it be different if I was deploying TKG for real in my environment, right? Would I still leverage this, or is it a completely different process?
So the TKG, what you're seeing right here is the TKG UI component to set up your management as well, your management cluster, if you will, right? So TKG leverages the cluster API model, which effectively says I'm going to have a management cluster, and then from the management cluster, I'm going to deploy workload clusters, essentially using Kubernetes to deploy Kubernetes. This UI that you see is the actual TKG UI for setting up that management environment. I can also just simply use the TKG CLI if I didn't want to use this UI. But this what you're seeing right here, Steve, is no different than what you would see if you were deploying it for real. You simply download the vSphere OVA components, or if you're doing it on an AWS, you get the AMIs. You'd launch the TKG init UI. You would get presented with the same page here, fill out the wizard just like Dale is doing, and it would go ahead and run through the deploy and pivot process that's going on.
Okay,
Awesome.
so you can see, thank you, Scotty, for tap dancing for me. I appreciate that because I'm not a really fast typist, but we got it in. You can see that it's actually starting to create the management cluster at this point. You can also watch progress over here in that putty session that we had opened, the one that looked like it was hung. Notice that now it's starting to spew out some information. So this is where I'm going to cheat in the demo just a little bit, because this runs anywhere from about 12 to 15 minutes in my environment, all right, to create the management cluster. So what we're going to do is, because I know how valuable you guys' time is, I actually created another management cluster that we're going to use for what we're going to do going forward. And now I'm going to log into that management, or into that, I shouldn't have said management cluster. Now I'm going to log into that demo appliance, and I'll show you around a little bit there. Just, I feel like I just confused the crap out of everybody. All right. Here's the demo appliance that we just deployed that's actually going and creating this management cluster, this guy right here. Because I didn't want you guys to have to wait, I have another demo appliance that's already up and running with a configured management cluster and a configured workload cluster that we're going to go take a look at. Here is that demo appliance. And if I do some super simple Kubernetes kind of commands, you can see the different pods that are there. I believe I can also do nodes, and it'll show me the different nodes that are there. I can do a TKG command, get management cluster. It'll tell me the name of the management cluster. One thing that I want to definitely point out is the fact that when you're working in TKG, or at least what we're working in today, it's a context sensitive. Notice right now we are in our workload cluster. How do I know that? Because of the name right here. If I want to kind of verify that, I can type TKG get cluster. And sure enough, there's my workload cluster, names match. So I'm actually working in that context right now. If I wanted to shift or change context, there's a command for that, and it's on the screen. The only thing I have to do is I have to make sure that everything matches, which means I got to get rid of that and get rid of that. Oh, so now you can see that my context has changed to the management domain, or the management cluster rather. So let's go and take a quick look at one of the demo apps. And I'm going to cut and paste a couple of commands here. We're going to create another namespace. And if I wanted to see my namespace, I could do this also. And there are all the different namespaces. And you can see we just created this one called Yelp. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to find out how I can access this little demo app that I mentioned. We're going to need this value right here. And up here, it's going to give me an IP address where I can find that guy. You can see the IP address is right there. So now if I open my browser and 178. Sorry, hold on a second. A non-proxied browser would help.
Do you have to expose it?
I'm sorry?
Do you have to expose your pod?
I did not. That error that you saw is because I have a proxy on my home lab or on my home network, and I don't allow that particular port for HTTP traffic, so it's going to stop it. So when I hopped over to a non-proxied browser, which Firefox is, I was able to pull up the application. So this is, I don't know, maybe Scotty or William one, if William joins, can talk to the history of this. I understand this thing's been around for a while, but this is one of the demo apps that is talked about in the documentation for this. And you can kind of sit here and make your votes or do whatever you want. One of the more interesting things in my mind is the fact that I can see which of the containers or which of the, if I go back over here, I can see right there, Yelp app server. And you see we're calling for one and one is up and running. It's been up for 2 minutes and 57 seconds. So how'd I do? 1240. That's 30 minutes to have TKG up and running in your home lab. I feel like I should drop the mic at this point. Questions? Go ahead.
I was going to say, didn't you just buy that mic? I don't know if you want to drop it.
I did. All right, you guys got to
virtual mic.
Yeah, you guys got to have some questions. So ask, because one of the things I'm more than open to doing is, hey, go back, show me how you did X, or show me what this looks like. Because you don't always, I think that's one of the benefits of sessions like this, is having somebody go and do it, because you can kind of see things that maybe you were unclear about, that you can just say, hey, can I look at that? Or can you show me more about that? Or do you understand this? Because at this point, everything that we're doing is on this nested cluster that you see right here. It's a 4-node cluster. I showed you the specs on the ESX boxes before. The physical VMs that make up those ESX hosts are right here. They're 2 network adapter, just not very big VMs at all, 2 CPU, 32 gig, 16 gig disk. Cool. Scotty, got some words of wisdom for these guys? By the way, my management cluster is still over here creating. So.
Sure, gang. So I just a couple of things. So Dale asked me, just kind of come on and talk a little bit about. I know that there's this desire to stand up Kubernetes, and then there seems to be this question that generally follows, like, all right, what if I get this thing up now? What do I do with it, and how do I proceed? And so I wondered if is it possible for me to share my screen, Dale, just real quick?
There you go, buddy. It's all you.
All right. Let's see here. All right. So everybody can kind of see my web browser here. If you're new to the Kubernetes space and you want to check out a couple of different things, this is probably the first stop that I would tell people now. So a little over a year ago, you might realize that we acquired a company called Heptio, which was founded, obviously by Joe Beda and Craig McCluskey, two of the three founders of Kubernetes. That Heptio team is amazing, and the talent and the women and men that we've got over there that are working, and they've developed along the instruction side. This is open and free to customers, to employees. This is not an internal VMware thing. It's just called Kube Academy. You go in and you sign up with an email address, and you can take some pretty good, I think, free courses to really help you sort of understand what you're doing. I think one of the biggest challenges for people when they go down this route is that they get something up, and if it's not comfortable with them, if they don't maybe come from a scripting or a developer background, or they're not comfortable with a CLI, it can be a little bit overwhelming to start. And so looking at the containers and Kubernetes 101 and some of these, like, beginning types of things, interacting with Kubernetes, et cetera, these are really free courses that are great, hands-on with, Kube Control, kubectl, which is the tool that you saw Dale using, right, to navigate through there. That would be sort of the first step that I would do in terms of just trying to base, get some familiarity, understand what exactly am I interacting with. If you feel like you've got that kind of experience, you've already been playing around with Kube Control, but you really want to understand sort of what's going on, and you want to kind of get into the depths. And some of you have probably heard this already, but I still recommend this. Check out Kelsey Hightower's Kubernetes the Hard Way. It's definitely something that's probably been mentioned 1,000 times. This is a public repo. What Kelsey does is he maintains this pretty good. It's, I guess maybe 2 revs behind, but what this will do is if you follow this deployment all the way through, these labs are done on the Google Cloud platform and actually on the free tier, so it really doesn't cost a whole lot to do this. So you don't even need to have, if you don't have hardware, if you don't have a home lab, and you just kind of want to, play around with this, this will take you some time. This will show you all of the gritty, nasty detail with certs. And when you think you're done with certs, there'll be some more certs that you have to play with to go through. But this will be really good in terms of understanding the basics of standing up and bootstrapping a cluster. The reason why I think this is important, folks, is because if you understand all of the manual stuff here, when you come back to platforms, whether it's TKG or SaaS-based platforms, TMC or vSphere 7 with Kubernetes, or any Kubernetes distribution that has some level of automation on the front end, like Dale was showing here with the TKG init process, I think it makes a bigger impact, and you start to appreciate the things that a lot of these systems do from an automation perspective and the benefits. And I think it helps us sort of articulate and understand what's going on. Now, a couple of other things that I do when I first started out, I just kind of went on and I Googled Kubernetes demo apps, and you'll get a bunch of different feeds, but this is a good repo here. Just Kubernetes, it's under the Kubernetes project, just examples. And these are very simple apps. These are, Cassandra databases or Guestbook or MySQL, staging, et cetera. And all of these have got great little deployments. And the best part about this is that you can't really crush anything. So download an app, take a look at that, the YAML that's there. Look at exposing, a service and understanding, how do I plumb up a load balancer associated with it, or if I need persistent storage, et cetera. Also in the Kubernetes documentation, there's a tutorial section here. And under the tutorials, this gives you some basics and some simple stateful and stateless applications, maybe even a little pipeline work if you want to kind of play around with Jenkins and do that. But these are all free and open and really easily written step-by-step stuff to try to get you, more and more comfortable with it. For those that want to take a look, something that we are building right now, it's really more focused on the TMC platform, which Dale, I know is not really a focus of this session, but we are actually building another Modern Apps Ninja course catalog, which is something that's coming from our product marketing group, or product management group, I should say. Right now, this is more product focus around some of the Tanzu mission control, and so there's some courses there that also has some labs that you might particularly leverage and play with. But my advice to everybody is that you would be surprised at the amount of stuff that you can find on GitHub and in the Kubernetes community just that's around simple apps, example apps. Google things like simple Kubernetes app, and you'll get 20 different possibilities that you can grab. You can copy those repos. Most of the artifacts are on, really accessible public, Docker Hub, that kind of stuff, to really just sort of play and work with it. So again, I think Kube Academy is a great place to start. And once you get that, if you really want to get into the gnarly weeds, Kubernetes the hard way is the gold standard for understanding everything that has to be done to setting up a cluster. And at that point, just start Googling things like, I want a demo app, I want to look at Guestbook or WordPress or other things like that. And really, there's probably 50 different directions people can go to, get started on their journey.
Yeah, hey, thanks very much, Scotty. That was exactly what I think everybody needed to hear. Just a little personal note. Some of you may know me, and you kind of know my background as being in primarily network and security, and you're probably wondering, well, why is this guy giving the demo on TKG? What's he got to do with Kubernetes? Well, I think because of the direction of the company and the direction of the industry, I think it's incumbent all of us at least have some literacy in Kubernetes. You understand at more than a high level, at a mid level at least, how things are working, what the benefits are from moving to a Kubernetes development and really a production environment. And for me, the easiest way for me to learn is to use the tools and use the product to actually stand it up, much like I just did for you guys here. So that's just my personal take on it. There are some great courses out there. Also, I've taken a couple on Udemy, and there is a certified Kubernetes administrator study group that meets on Friday afternoons. I can provide you more information if you want to drop me an email or a Slack after this meeting. I can't give out the person's name because I didn't check with him first, but I'm pretty certain that we can get you into that study group. Got 10 minutes left.
Hey, Dale and Scott, could I ask you guys a question? By the way, this is a great demo. The question I have is you just showed us how to deploy Kubernetes within TKG. Can I ask, if someone were to try to learn Kubernetes, my thought would have been, hey, you know what? Just deploy VRA or VRO, and Kubernetes is already built inside of that, and you can actually just start playing right away. Can you explain about the bigger value of TKG deployment method versus recommending someone doing the OVA for VRO or VRA?
I don't know that I can really articulate that other than to say that TKG is obviously the path forward, whether it's on or in vSphere. So that was my desire to at least get some familiarity with it. I mean, at the end of the day, and Scotty can really straighten me out here on my terminology, but TKG is just an implementation, or it uses the cluster API to create everything that it's going to be doing. So as you think about, and I'm kind of surprised to even hear myself say this, but as you think about where the future of Kubernetes is going, wow, that's something for me to be saying that. That's probably a direction that we're going to head to, that cluster API. So Scotty?
Yeah, so Sana, I would maybe kind of reframe the question a little bit. So when I think about VRA, I think about a tool that allows me to do a lot of different things. So I can blueprint and deploy virtual machines. I could blueprint and deploy Kubernetes clusters, other services. I can wrap governance around it and framework it set, those sorts of workflow, type of management, private clouds, public clouds, et cetera. It is true that the VRA appliance itself, the platform itself, does leverage Kubernetes now inside of it to perform some of the functions that are there. But deploying VRA and just standing up VRA is not really going to give you a Kubernetes experience in the sense of interacting with, and dealing with a Kubernetes cluster. I think if what you're wanting to do is to learn Kubernetes, you could, if you have the ability, obviously, working for VMware, right, you could stand up and learn it on our products, right, as Dale was talking about. If you want a quick hit there, depending on if you want to learn from the platform side, the operator side, and standing it up, obviously things like TKG and, our platforms will help there. If you want to learn about more the consumption of the Kubernetes API, so how to interact with it, how to deploy apps and things of that nature. If you don't have a lab environment or don't have the resources, there are a lot of sort of low tiers, even in the public cloud providers, that people can use. That's what I used in my early days, just to try to interact with a Kubernetes API. I could stand up a small cluster in AWS or Google for $5 a month and just playing with it. All of these solutions are delivering the same upstream Kubernetes API to consume. The VRA platform is really more of a different function, if you will, in this, and that I can leverage VRA to potentially deploy Kubernetes or maybe provide some governance around those types of infrastructures, maybe even use VRA to call a TKG, API or CLI to deploy a TKG cluster. But in terms of interacting with the cluster directly, I'm probably not going to do that through VRA as much as I'm going to interact directly. I'm going to use VRA generally to sort of manage potentially the deployment of that cluster, et cetera. So they're a little bit different in their functionality, but I really think, Son, it depends upon what you want to focus your learnings on and how you want to approach that.
Just to let you know, so I run a Kubernetes environment, pure, CentOS. I run, Kubernetes with Minikube and MicroKube, right? MicroKS. What I meant to say was just like you said, VRA and VRO. If you just deploy the OVA, Kubernetes is already built inside. So let's not worry about even doing VRO, and let's not even worry about doing VRA. But you can actually run actual Kubernetes pods inside of that, as if you are running on an open source or even on TKG. My ask was I didn't use VRA VRO for the sake of that. I actually use it because Kubernetes is already built in, and it took me only one OVA to get Kubernetes up and running. Do you know what I mean?
The one thing I would add is when I started on my Kubernetes learning journey, I started on a virtualized 1804 LTS box that just had Docker and very simple Kubernetes on it. And I went through, like I said, a couple of courses on Udemy, just using that as the platform to help me to really understand, just like Scotty said, to understand it at a very base level. So if you want, there's a lot of different ways that you can learn it, that's for sure.
Hey, Scotty,
So I just had, sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry, Steve. I just have one question. Do we have time or can I?
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes, so take it away.
Okay, I'll just make it quick. So does this have anything to do with upgrades? I mean, does this impact upgrades in any which ways, the core platform? If I intend to upgrade further, do I have to do something additionally to take care of my TKG management clusters, or is it all, like, I'm just trying to understand the interoperability. Is there something that I should keep in mind before we go ahead and plan an upgrade?
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing the question, but I think it was around sort of what the process would be to upgrade my TKG clusters and how that would work.
Yeah, how would that impact my core vSphere? I mean, whenever I'm deploying it on a vSphere, how would it affect or how would it impact? Do I have to be cautious about something in my mind before I plan an upgrade?
So if I'm just talking about TKG standalone or TKG multi-cloud, I think is what they're calling it, what Dale is showing here, the TKG deployment actually deploys VMs on top of it. Now, there are a couple of dependencies. So TKG today is supported on vSphere 6.7 Update 3 and later if you're deploying it on top of it. But the VMs that get deployed, those control VMs and worker node VMs that make up your cluster, as long as they're running on a supported version of vSphere, upgrading the Kubernetes cluster itself doesn't require me to upgrade the vSphere environment, today. I mean, I guess in theory, if there was maybe a CSI or a container storage interface or something like that feature that you wanted to take advantage of in vSphere, maybe there could be a dependency there, but it's not. This is not the integrated vSphere 7 with Kubernetes, which in that model, there's a little bit more of an opinionated way to do this, and so there's a little bit more of a direct tie-in. But I can upgrade my Kubernetes clusters, my TKG clusters on top of a supported vSphere version without having to touch, vCenter or ESX in that environment.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
actually, what I showed you, you could actually run different versions of Kubernetes. That's supported also.
So Scotty, I know you've got to drop here in a second, but quick question: do we have any hands-on labs available to help with any of our Kubernetes stuff?
Yeah, so there are a couple of hands-on labs that are available today. I will tell you, Steve, that if we can, the team is actually in process of developing updated hands-on lab for both the vSphere 7 with Kubernetes, as well as standalone TKG. So Bob Bauer from my team and a few others are in the process as a part of the natural VMworld HOL development cycle. So there's a couple of click-through demos or integrated simulations that are out there today on the VMworld VMware HOL catalog. Those are in the process of being upgraded to some more live things. So stay tuned on that, Steve. We should see a few of those released this summer.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think you needed to drop, right, Scotty? So appreciate.
Yeah, but I got to go. I appreciate it, gang. Thanks, Dale.
Hey, thank you for your time, Scotty.
Yeah, thanks, Scotty.
Yep.
Any more
All
questions,
right.
guys?
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. Any other final thoughts from anybody? Questions, comments?
Hey, thanks very much for your time, guys.
Thanks, Dale. This has been great. So
Great.
I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Thanks, Dale.
It's easy.
Take care, everyone.